Hi, my name is Ben, and welcome to Field Foley, episode 1. And my first guest is Greg Lester. He's a sound designer for video games at Soundcuts. He's also one of the creators of GameAudioLearning.com, a central learning space for everything about game audio, which I really recommend you checking out. And recently, he and Lewis Thompson launched Airwiggles, a brand new community for all things audio. So, welcome, Greg.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I'm really excited to chat about some field recording and sound design.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's get right into it. I mean, the first question that always comes to my mind when talking to people is the question, why did you record your first sound and what was it? So maybe you have something in mind. It might not be the first sound, but maybe the first thing that comes to mind. So
that is a good question. So I very much remember when I really first started, quote unquote, collecting sounds. And that was when I started, I invested in a Zoom H5 when I was at university. And I can't really remember the first sound that I recorded, but what I can remember was something that one of my favorite sounds, which is this tiny stream that has actually a poem etched into like the side of the stone that it flows, and it's got this unbelievable, wonderful, like Zen trickling sound. And I've used that, I think, across a bunch of projects because it's this perfect, like close mic'd, really clean, just super meditative sound. And that is like running water for me is just something that is always super calming.
Oh yeah, I can totally relate to that. I have my fair share of stream and river recordings, and every river and every spot is different. So but I also have like a couple of favorites I use in many projects. So can really relate to that. That's nice. And so as you first started out and started to collect sounds. Do you remember what kind of things you struggled with the most starting out, and especially how did you overcome it? Because trying to get people to see the beginnings of Foley and field recording artists, so that is probably nice to know for newcomers.
For sure, yeah. So I think one of the big struggles, especially in the beginning for me, was the fact that I didn't really know how to get the gain staging right. And I think a lot of the time, especially because I am a weird person where I actually really hate monitoring. I don't like listening to the sounds on headphones. I usually don't have headphones when I go out recording, which is super crazy. And but essentially, I just love to kind of experiment around with stuff and play, and I get like a million takes of everything at like different gains and also kind of different mic positions, and then I listen to it back later and figure out like, okay, these are the ones that are interesting for this type of stuff, and so I kind of analyze it afterwards because I feel like also when I'm listening to it, the other part is that I only have open back headphones at the moment, so it's kind of useless to go out into the field with open back headphones. Yeah, unless you kind of turn it up so loud that you're going to get bleed anyway. So it's but basically the gain staging was a big one for me, and that was really kind of down to just really practice. But it helped. What really helped, I think, was to check the levels visually, and then later when I actually had time to sit down and listen to the recordings in the studio or in my room, in my bedroom at the time, that was then kind of just analyzing it and looking at, okay, what kind of volume works the best for this, kind of what I just said, but it was really just figuring out like general levels and figuring out how the Zoom H5 reacted, because I think that's a big one. It's always like super awesome to have a bunch of gear and everything, but the best thing is just if you know how to use it. And I think the same goes for like headphones and monitors and everything. If you know the sound of something, and kind of learn how to get the best out of it and how intuitively it sounds, I think that is like a huge thing. And that just comes over practice. And it's not just then recording, but also really listening back to the recordings, like listening to your stuff, experimenting with different gains and listening back to it and afterwards. And yeah, just kind of like making notes and figuring out, okay, yeah, I can hear the hiss in here and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I struggled with. Let me think if there's anything else. I think also planning wise, I remember doing a recording session. We did a huge glass recording session in the studio where we had a bunch of mics, and that was super cool. But we didn't really have a plan on what mics were going to be used for what, and I guess what we were really trying to get out of it. We were just kind of like going in and smashing some bottles and stuff, and we got some really cool source material. But it was kind of afterwards, when I listened to the recordings, it was like, yeah, it would have been good to have like a plan first and to test things out and kind of do almost like a dry run and then figure out with just a couple of the bottles, write down what works well, which like mic positions, because we were using like way too many mics because we were at university and we had the option to do it. So, but yeah, and then it was kind of just having to edit all of those different microphones as well, where a lot of them just didn't sound good because again, there was no purpose really for them. We just set them up to experiment. But not even that, it was just kind of a bit random. So I think that's also a big one, just kind of like if you're going into a studio session specifically, I think it's really good to have an idea going into it of what exactly you want to get out of it, and to just make some basic notes on that and do a little bit more research about like the gear that you're using, which I definitely didn't do. So yeah, those would be the two main ones, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Can also totally relate to that. With every new microphone, there comes like this experimentation phase where you're just trying to figure out how loud you can record something, how you use it, and it's always fun, but it's always a lot of material. It's just crap, and you just throw it away. Yeah, that's interesting that you had the same experience with those multi-mic setups, where most of them were probably not the right mics and positions.
Yep.
Yeah, and do you have a sound in mind that was harder to capture or to make than you thought first?
Oh yeah, anything that is like collision and impact type of stuff. And the main reason is because it used to just clip all the time. And if it didn't clip, if I set the gain right, then it was like, well, this sounds tiny.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge struggle for a very long time. And one of the big things now that changed it is really 32-bit recording for me, the 32-bit float. Mm-hmm. And that has changed my entire workflow and everything as well. That's really enabled me to do more of what I want to do, which is, for me, it's just kind of experimenting with the sound source and with the actual recording of it, rather than Aegis kind of like, adjusting the gain and fiddling with that stuff, which I'm not a fan of at all. And it goes the same for camera. Like when I looked into buying a new YouTube camera, sorry, small tangent, but basically it was like, I looked into like all these amazing cameras, and I bought a book and read about like all of the tech behind it and how I need to set up all of this. And then I realized, like, my goodness, I'm gonna spend so much time setting all of this up for like, 10-minute video. And I probably won't shoot it in a day. And so one of the biggest bottlenecks to me making any videos, it's two things. It's the actual recording of it, and then the second part is the editing of it. And so with the recording, because I enjoy writing and researching and making the sounds and everything, but then it was like, there's this camera which basically does everything for you, and you press one button and it like blurs the background by changing the aperture. And it was like, oh my God, this will just make it easy. And so I bought it, and it did. And I had the same exact experience with the Zoom F3, which was just like, this device is kind of like, you take it with you, it turns on immediately, basically. It's super no-faff type, like plug in, press record, done. Like no real gain staging, all of that. And it's so great because, yeah, that's really the part that I enjoy about field recording. And so basically with like all of the collision stuff, having the infinite headroom, so to speak, that it doesn't clip, I don't have to worry about that, because if it does exceed, then it will just auto mute and not totally destroy it. So kind of I started just more now doing the same as I've done before, putting the mics into different positions, and usually like for collisions, the recent library that I did for the for a project that I'm working on, where I did a bunch of different collision stuff and impacts. I used a shotgun mic in channel 1 and a contact mic in channel 2. And then afterwards, I basically split them out into 2 mono separate tracks, and I can use kind of both microphones, but they're obviously totally in sync, which is awesome. So yeah, it's just been like incredible to have clip-free recordings with no complication of setup. But the other thing is that I realized that a bunch of the sounds still sound super thin, and that then came down to kind of the processing. And so that's the second part, is like learning how to do the processing in your recordings, and that kind of then feeds back into the actual recording process. So now I kind of go into the sessions knowing usually what kind of processing I want to apply, and kind of the result I'm trying to get and how it will probably sound. And then if I can, I will do some recordings, some test recordings. Then I run them through the processing and really try and learn from it. And then I do a second recording to really kind of get the full the full width of the source material and the entire session. So yeah, it's kind of technology, I guess, and practice. Yeah.
Always the practice and feedback loop. I think it's true for every craft, but I know what you mean. If you learn how your recorded sounds work later on in the stages, that influences your recording, and then it goes vice versa. Yeah, that's interesting. So impact sounds was also for me a hard thing to do, and I had a similar experience just like you, but for me the breakthrough was first with my contact mic, because that is my overall weapon I always have in my bag. And for impact sounds, like you said, shotgun mic plus contact mic makes for great impact sounds. You can mix and match and fade, and it's always a great tip. So if you don't have a contact mic yet, get one.
Yeah, and there's like some pretty cheap ones out there, I think.
You can also make them yourself. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Aiden Hall, I think, posted a whole tutorial on Airwiggles at some point. He took apart a fire alarm, I believe.
Yes. We're gonna link it in this episode, because that's a very nice little experiment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's super cool. I had no idea you could do that.
Yeah. And in contrast to that, do you have a sound that was way easier to capture or to make than you first thought?
Yeah, I think, I mean, when I started, I was going kind of, like I said, Zoom H5 and just the capsules, the standard XY capsule. And I really enjoyed capturing ambiences with that. I feel like that was getting like good ambient sounds was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. Just from choosing the right spots and kind of making sure that you're not near the microphone and that there's not too much distinct sounds. So if it's a crowd, kind of, not having too many close voices is great. So you can just get more of a walla track and stuff like that. But sometimes those details are really awesome as well. I'm just coming, so obviously from the game background, and often when you do loops and stuff like that, you don't necessarily want to have anything distinct, just because it then sticks out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of breaks the immersion. And so that was one of the big things for me, is like trying to get that more, I guess, subtle ambience where nothing really sticks out too much. But yeah, I think that was also just like really going out and figuring out more the recording locations than anything else. So where do you get that type of sound, those diffuse ambiences? But that was definitely easier than I anticipated it to be initially, I think. And it's a bit of a expectation versus reality type thing as well, I think. There's a lot of things like I really struggled with doing gore.
Yeah.
I thought like, oh yeah, that'd be super easy. And then all the stuff that that came out was like, well, this is incredibly disappointing.
Yeah. It feels violent and it looks violent, but it doesn't sound like anything, yeah.
Yeah, and we took some pictures of the session and it looked great. And it was like, it just doesn't quite match. And yeah, that was a tricky one for sure. Yeah, I don't know. That was, I think, I haven't done that in a while, but now I know also that so much in those type of recordings is just getting an incredibly clean sound, and then just doing a bunch of processing with it, especially for the hyperreal stuff.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And it's always, I mean, the old trick, I would say, many of us know already, is like freeze some maybe bell peppers or leek or something like that and break it. You have the bone cracking sound, and I mean, for wet sounds you can use like any wet like sludge you can find. But I can definitely relate to that. You want something specific. You don't want it too comical. You don't want it too soft. You don't want it too hard. And getting the right impact sound. I remember me stabbing like a pumpkin with a knife, like for I think an hour, until I got, I think 5 or 6 sound of it that I really liked. And all the rest of the session was just, I don't know. It sounded either too soft or like very short and not impactful at all. And that is a really frustrating thing to do. So
totally relatable. Yeah. I think another tip I just like remember as well from, so just doing things with other people is it increases the fun, and I think it's also good for learning. When I did all of those bigger recording sessions at university, I always had a friend with me who was also into field and Foley recording and just in general recording kind of all kinds of different sounds. And it was super helpful also in the editing phase because, it was just like, not having to edit like so much just by myself was really, really useful. So get your friends involved.
Yeah, but that brings me to another point. Getting out into the field, and especially if you want to have like quiet ambiences or some sounds, trying to stay still and be silent and not like breathe through your nose or something like that is really hard, especially if you're more than one people, if you have like camera crew maybe with you or something like that. But other than having people around, like the whole nature of our current world, I would say, is the sound pollution is really, in most places, very frustrating, I would say. Especially airplanes, for me personally, are like a big deal, and of course the German Autobahn. So maybe this question for you: how do you deal with sound pollution? Do you have like any maybe tips, or do you have like an approach? Do you scout locations, or what's your like tip for that?
Yeah, great question. I definitely feel you. I take a lot of my ritual is usually I take a walk in the evening because I work remotely, so I'm in my studio or my room all day, and I then have to just get out at least once a day. And when I walk in the evening, there's a park nearby, and there's like a road, which is not quite a autobahn or like a motorway, but the closest you can get to that, I guess. And it's also just you can hear it across the field because there's not a lot of trees as well, and it just kind of it just always is like this is. Yeah, like when I go to Austria and I'm like in the mountains or somewhere, and it's like, the peace and the quiet, like it's so nice. But yeah, airplanes as well are super annoying. I have to say, I usually don't do that much kind of ambience recording and that stuff. I do a lot of for like the games that I work on and things. I do a lot of indoor recording. So I set up a little kind of recording nook where I have some acoustical treatment that's reasonably thick, and I have like a second carpet, and with the shotgun mic kind of pointing into the corner of that, it's a really good kind of bass noise level, like very, very little. I always make sure to put my PC on sleep mode because otherwise there's just a constant hum. But when I'm outdoors, if I can help it, I try to go out in the evening, just because it's way quieter. Obviously, for ambiences and stuff, that's tricky because then it's totally different. But if I'm doing any type of spot effect stuff, then I try to go out in the evening just because it's so much quieter. And it's also nice. You don't get looked at too weird by too many people.
Yeah, that's always the case. I remember when I'm out with the parabolic mic, people think I'm a spy. But because of my rather colorful hair, I can always convince them that I'm certainly not a spy with my getup. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to do because I also try to go out in the evening or rather even at night and sometimes before daybreak for some stuff. But as you said, sometimes you come to a place where you really like the ambience, but in the morning hours there's something different or something else. I mean, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's something totally new, but sometimes it's not the thing you wanted. So it's always, I mean, as I said, especially with airplanes or like traffic, it's always hard to find like the perfect spot.
Yeah, and regarding location scouting, I mean, like, I definitely can recommend this as well. Like, just walking around, taking long walks around wherever you're based. Kind of that's what I do a lot as well. And I now know the sounds of certain locations and what I can find there. And I know kind of like a forest where it's pretty quiet, where there's a bunch of old timber, where I could record all kinds of wood and organic material ripping and all that kind of stuff. And I know that, if I go during the week in the morning, there won't be any families out there and stuff like that because everyone is at work. So it's kind of figuring out, what locations within reasonable reach around you are good for certain types of sounds, and then kind of making a little mental map, I guess, of what are the sounds in your area around you, and when are the best times to kind of go and collect them, I guess.
Yeah, maybe we should do an actual map, because I used to like set pins on Google Maps for different locations, especially for the one game I needed a certain type of waterfall, not too big, not too small, and I was scouting like images on Google Maps for waterfalls in my area, so to say, and I just drove to each of them and tried to find the perfect one. And then I make some notes on Google Maps and have my locations, and now I have like 15 waterfalls where I know I can record. So
what a great idea.
Let's get together and to start this via Airwiggles, maybe make a community map out of it.
That'd
Could be interesting.
Super cool.
Yeah. Especially if people are like on holiday and bring their gear, because you always bring your gear, right?
Yeah, sound map or something. Sound maps, I don't know. That'd be super cool.
That would be great. Yeah.
What a brilliant idea. Excellent. Nice one, Ben.
Right. So yeah, and on that topic of going out and recording or inside, doesn't matter really. Do you have like a favorite mic, maybe single or even like a recording setup, like maybe a combination of mics or maybe some kind of technique you use where you like always like the result or is like your go-to thing?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, I am hugely into mono. I think it's part of the game
Yeah,
background.
absolutely.
So I record 99% of my stuff in mono. And then the other thing is because of like not having that many channels. Well, I have a Zoom F8 as well, but that's my audio interface. And the reason for that is that then I can like essentially I have if I do need to record stereo, I have like in my recording nook, I have like another 2 extension leads and I have a swivel arm that my main shotgun mic is on, so I can like record a bunch of stuff at once indoors, which is super nice, into my computer, very easy. But other than that, now that I've gotten the Zoom F3, I'm basically just all about that. And like I said before, I'm more of a minimalist when it comes to these things. So my favorite microphone at the moment, which is my only shotgun and my workhorse, is the Zoom NTG3. I think it's one of the best on the market for the price in terms of what you get from shotgun mics, for sure. And I can definitely recommend people who are kind of a little bit along their journey, so not like total beginners, but if you've got a little bit of money to invest and you're looking for an upgrade to the maybe, you know, your capsules of the portable field recorder, I can definitely fully recommend the NTG3. It has such a good bass response as well and is really nice. So I use that always pretty much in combination usually with either my AKG C411, which is the contact mic, or in combination with one of the micro Uzi capsules from Loam, which, yeah, they're just, you know, incredible, especially again for the price. Like, I think they were 120 euros or pounds or something for the pair, and they are unbelievably detailed. Great for very subtle sounds like mechanical things or close-up Foley. And yeah, it's great because when I use them, again, I have left and right, I split them out, and then I have more of the body in the NTG3 and the high end, the crispness in the micro Uzi. And then one of them is usually good, or if not, like together. And so that's really how I enjoy working. I'm all about like portable setup as well, so that works really well. I go to Austria a lot, or not that much, but a reasonable amount, and I don't like to bring a suitcase, so I just travel with a big backpack with hand luggage essentially, and so it's really great. I have a little whatever it's called, like travel case where everything fits in. The Zoom F3 and kind of like the micro Uzis, the contact mic, and then just a pouch and a protector for the NTG3. And that's just my setup, along with a bunch of rechargeable batteries.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the main one, I would say.
Yeah. What I can recommend is like getting some kind of portable battery. I got one with USB, and I made a little case with a 3D printer to put it onto my Zoom. So now I have essentially a USB chargeable Zoom, which is nice because I always hate bringing around a lot of batteries. But yeah, it's funny that you said it because the micro Uzis are also like my go-to thing, especially for stereo recording. I always like to have them like on a pole somewhere, stand them somewhere, and especially for ambiences as well. I used to in the beginning do a lot of mechanical stuff and very finicky small stuff because that's like the advertisement. But I'm beginning to use that for a lot of ambiences as well, and I really like that. Can really recommend trying that for like just a stereo ambient recording as well. Cool.
Yeah, the ambience. I have done that with. I have a little. What is it called? Where you hang up your clothes. The
clothes hanger, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Clothes hanger. Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes the words just escape us. I know.
English is hard. And it has two little clips on the side,
nice.
and so I can basically just on the wing protectors they have little kind of elastic strings that stand off.
Yeah.
And I put them on that, and it gives me a little kind of A/B setup, and it's so fantastic. When there's thunderstorms, I open my window, and it like opens from bottom to top, so the window provides like a shield, and then I basically just put the hanger, the clothes hanger on like the top rim, and hang the microphones out so they don't get wet, and I just like great, yeah, it just captures amazing, wonderful rain ambience and that kind of stuff, and also indoors when like the rain gets blown onto the window, and I've put it again same position, kind of like hung it up on the thing where you open the window, and yeah, it's been fantastic. I love the micro Uzis so much.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a nice idea with the clothes hanger. I have like a small stereo bar, which I use, but I feel I always bring too much gear, but I don't know. I just like lugging stuff around, and when I'm like out in the field and scouting a new location, and I don't have a particular microphone, I'm always like, I could have gotten that one. I have to drive again, and so I try to bring at least like contact microphones, underwater microphones, the Uzis, and the boomstick, and something like that. So.
A hydrophone is definitely on my shopping list at some point, on my wish list.
Yeah, I can also really recommend that, especially for, like you said, like streams. I find that using like either for stereo, or if you want a mono recording, like a boom mic plus the underwater microphone, and mixing that in gradually, or for some amount, it really adds to the character. And stuff like submerging into the water, you can do it at home in your bathtub, or in like a whatever kind of container you like, to get different sounds. You can even, if you have a good one, you can even boil them. I tested it, and it's,
oh my god,
it's really interesting.
Crazy.
I got some from Jeff Riley French. I don't know if I pronounced the name correctly, but I can really recommend them. They are handmade and have like lots of layers. It's like a thick block of microphone, and you can essentially, to a certain degree, boil them and also freeze them. So put them in the freezer in some ice, and then let's just leave them on the countertop and let the ice thaw, and you get some nice cracks in there.
Insane.
Yeah, really, really nice stuff. You can get really creative with them. So those are always my go-to things I always have with me, like the context mics and the underwater mics, because there's always some kind of thing, like a hole. You just try to lower them down and see what's down there with your ears, essentially. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So, do you like have any other special tip or maybe technique you like to share? I mean, the clothes hanger is pretty good. I think that is on my to-do list for the holidays, when I have not much space to bring gear, because I will certainly try that one.
Yeah, that's definitely not my idea. I saw someone else do it and copied it, and I think I posted the picture, and then I think people were like, "Oh, that's a great idea," and it's like, "Yep, not mine." Also, just totally copied. But it's good to share the knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think a huge tip for me is I'm actually doing a new video series at the moment, which is taking absolute ages. But it's kind of like, it's called Sound Library Highlight. And as the name kind of suggests, it goes into and underneath the hood of some of my favorite sound libraries. And I kind of interview the creators. So it's similar to this, except that if I have made a sound library, I guess. And before the interview, I spent considerable amount of time just listening to all of the different sounds to really get familiar with the actual content, more than I usually would, because usually when I buy a library, it serves a purpose in terms of a hole that I need to fill for a project that I'm currently working on or something like that. I don't often just buy libraries for the sake of them because money.
Of course.
And I like to record stuff. But essentially, really kind of I need the German, well, the English word for auseinandersetzen. Basically, I spend a lot of time just listening to those and really get to know the source material of the library, or like the full material. And by doing that, especially if it's a more interesting, like, creative library, like, for example, Metamorphosis by Mattia Cellotto. All of Mattia Cellotto's libraries are super insane. But specifically this one, it's kind of a mixture of synthesis and tons of recorder material that was recorded with ultrasonic microphones at super high sample rates. And so the idea of it was to stretch it and pitch it down and stuff like that, and see what kind of crazy cool things can happen with that. Of course, that's reasonably popular now with the Sanken CO 100K and stuff like that. But I think when it came out, it was less market available, I guess. And the process of listening to all of these recordings and just really trying to figure out, like, how did these come to be, and what kind of questions do I want to ask Mattia or whoever else about this, and really kind of think about the creation and the creative process, and try and listen to every single sound, and kind of really, again, make a mental map of it. And then later speaking to the person about it and about the recording techniques. And some of them I was spot on, others, like, I couldn't have been further off. And it was, like, incredible to hear how they were actually created, and the unbelievable creativity with which, kind of, again, stuff like you said, where you put your hydrophone into a freezer, into an ice block, and then let it thaw or boil it. Like, those types of things absolutely fascinate me. And I think if you can do one thing, is just listen to sound libraries, and also the free ones. And it doesn't sound like much, but just really analyzing the material and trying to figure out how this was made, what sounds like what, I guess, kind of building a mental lexicon or encyclopedia of how things sound, I think, is super helpful. And then also trying to put that into words is something else, because when you speak to fellow sound designers, field recordists, game audio people, whatever, trying to convey the information that's in your head of those sounds into words can often be super hard. And so that's definitely also a skill to learn, and that can be practiced by doing that. And yeah, I think just, like, ask people. I've only recently gotten good at that. I am more of a shy person in general, which it might not seem that way, but I often, in front of, like, meeting new people or something, I get a little bit of anxiety and stuff, and it's gotten way better now by just being more exposed to it. So the field recording and game audio community, and, like, just in general audio community, is such full of, like, amazing and wonderful people. And so, yeah, just kind of reaching out and being like, oh, how do I do this? Or how did you get to this sound? Or any tips and stuff like that has been just super helpful to me personally. And so that would be a huge kind of thing that I would recommend to people, is to really just listen to your sounds that you record yourself, and also the ones that you acquire, whether you purchase them or download them for free. And then, yeah, reach out to people and ask them. And yeah, I think in combination, those three things will really kind of help you get a lot further. And then the obvious one is just, like, practice. But I think also don't be scared of not doing it the right way, because I think doing things the wrong way can often get you really cool results, unless you kill your mics, which is not a good idea.
Yeah. Sometimes it's worth it, but rarely. Rarely. Yeah.
Yeah, but in general, I think kind of, like I said, I do I do most of my field recording without headphones, which most people will consider to be totally illegal and stupid and crazy. But that's just how I like to do it, and I can really then focus in on the actual sounds and getting the most out of an object. I think another good practice is to try and take simple objects and try to rinse them of all the audio, like say a book, and you can tear the pages, you can smack it against things, you can maybe use your breath and blow so the pages rattle and all of these kinds of different things. So there's really so much more kind of hidden in terms of sound in every single object to unlock, so to speak. And so I think the last thing would be to, when you go to places, take your headphones out sometimes. Like don't wear headphones, just listen and listen to how your environment sounds. I think that is for sure hard as well, because usually then our thoughts come and occupy us and stuff, but literally just being on the train and listening to all of the different elements of the sound and how the door opens, and this might be cool for a spaceship when you have like the and all of that stuff. And if you have your phone, I think the phone is also a super underrated recorder, and it has built-in epic multiband compression, so you don't even need to put OTT on afterwards. So I've used some of my recorded sounds from my phone in like projects. It doesn't happen that often, because now I usually go out with my F3 when I try and record stuff, but there have been cases where like I was on a bus and it made this really cool sound when the hydraulics whatever like happened, and I recorded that, and that made it into one of my designs. And so I think recording a sound with something is better than not recording it, even if it's maybe not your desired quality, but oftentimes you're going to process it anyway, so like might as well do it. And if it's not good, well, then at least you recorded it and kind of listened back to it and solidified the sound in your mental lexicon or encyclopedia, I guess. So that would be my main tips, I think.
Yeah, I can totally say the same. Active listening, and especially there is no wrong way. It's like exploration, having fun. So much great sounds come from accidents. So don't be afraid to try anything and everything. Like you said with the book, for example, I can totally agree with that. Trying to give you a challenge, just like take one item and spend like an hour or two maybe, and just experiment and get a feel for what you can do, and then that opens up your horizon to different possibilities with everything you have.
I forgot to mention as well, I watched a really cool GDC talk. I forgot what it was called, but it was, I think, I'm pretty sure it was the Foley for Alien Isolation. The Foley recordings. And I think one of the quotes from one of the Foley artists was that Foley is like live sound design.
Yes.
And that was... It's so obvious, right? And some people get that very early on, but for me, that was like a huge change in my mental, or like my mindset essentially towards field recording, and how I approached it as well. And I think, especially then after kind of also doing these videos and the libraries, it's like, wow, there's so much more you can do, and in terms of being creative with getting the sounds in the first place, and what kind of sounds you can create by just recording without any processing, because I'm super big on like using a million plugins and making crazy stuff with it. But I think the results that can be achieved by just getting a little bit creative and like really ignoring the rules, and that's really hard, because especially when people come from an academic background, especially I think music background is the worst for that, because in music, especially like classical music, there's so many rules, and if you're not doing it, there's a clear wrong way a lot of the time, or perceived wrong way at least. And I think that really gets instilled into a lot of the students especially. And so then it's really hard to break away from that and to go into field recording and even like sound design, and just then feeling like, well, you know, my gain isn't set correctly, so these sounds are useless anyway, and stuff like that. And that was a big issue for me as well, that it took a long time to overcome that. And I would often then just feel like the stuff that I recorded, because it had a little bit too much noise, was just not, you know, even useful, even though I could have totally made some cool stuff out of it. Just the fact that it was quote unquote kind of like wrong, not as, you know, not according to the rules that I learned.
You feel like you're not a professional, and so it can't be anything good.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, that's exactly it. So that's, just like, there's really rules are there to break them, I guess, and some of them for sure make sense and are really good. But I think understanding them to then realize, like, you know, okay, in this situation this might not be applicable is also good, or I'm gonna try something else. So yeah, that's a big one for sure as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good closing word for this episode. So thank you for being my first guest and for sharing your knowledge and your tips and insights. Glad you took the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure and super fun to chat. And yeah, looking forward to nerding out some more about field recording and sound design at some point again.
We will definitely do that. Looking for more audio-related podcasts to listen to? We're part of the Audio Podcast Alliance, featuring a hand-picked selection of the very best podcasts about sound. Be sure to hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting on patreon.com/fieldandfoley or ko-fi.com/fieldandfoley, where you gain early access to episodes in lossless format and can submit questions for our guests. Thank you for listening.